Hi, I'm David Partika, and I created CSS Burner as an automation tool for rapid CSS optimization. Now, I've noticed for some style sheets, there's no way to 100% unambiguously verify an error because there needs to be a reference to the DOM. The DOM needs to be inspected for a few of the errors um, so that the error can be verified or to be either true or false. So I've added a new feature to CSS Burner which allows one to include the URL for the DOM. So let's show you exactly what I'm talking about here, and then I could show you how the DOM inclusion tool can be useful for you. So here I have for CSS Burner itself, I have the style sheet CSS. I already have it pasted into the text area. Let's scan this CSS and not include the DOM URL, which we see as this checkbox, this fourth one for level of scanning detail. So let's scan this CSS, and after a few seconds, we notice in fact there is one error that was detected, and we highlight by clicking the paintbrush, and we see that for the text indent property, the selector, which includes the label element, this selector cannot support the text indent property. So in other words, the text indent property will not work for inline elements unless you specify the display, in this case, of the element, which here is label, to be block or inline block, and there's a couple of others. I think flex will also work. So what we see here is that this appears to be an error, but if you would go to the DOM of where this rule is actually implemented, which is in one of the blog entries, and we'll view the page source, what we'll see is that, in fact, within a style tag, just for the blog, the label element has been given a display block. So in fact, that selector for the style sheet, that is a valid selector because the label has been declared to be display block. So in this case, the style sheet by itself is not enough to tell the parser that that is not an error and text indent should work for that particular selector. So what we can do is let's reset. Oh, wrong one, sorry. Reset and view the page source for CSS Burner itself. Let's get the style sheet markup and let's paste it into the text area. Now we're going to do something different. We're going to repeat what we did before, scanning the CSS, with one difference. We're going to check the box here for include DOM URL, and we're going to take the URL that's relevant for this particular selector, and we're going to paste it into the box here. And now we're going to scan this CSS style sheet again, but in this particular situation, the backend parser knows to check that URL to grab its DOM and to see if there are any style tags or any rules that declare, in this case, the label element to be display block or inline block, so that in fact that selector that was an error before is relevant. So and not an error. So let's scan here. And now what we see is that there are no more errors in the report. There are only warnings and optimizations. So let's look, just by searching, let's look for that selector which had input plus label and had text indent. And we see that in fact text indent now is accepted as being perfectly valid, and for this rule the text will be indented and the parser finds nothing wrong with this rule here because it knew to look in the DOM within that style tag for a display block rule or an inline block for the label element, and that's what it did. So this is a useful feature which, as I said before, I started to realize that the DOM is necessary to verify that an error warning optimization is valid or not valid. In a few cases, it's necessary. So that's why I added this checkbox. And again, just to reiterate, you access that checkbox by clicking on the include DOM URL and then adding to the text box here the URL for which that rule is relevant. So I hope you'll find this feature useful, and if you like what you saw here, please give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the Optimized CSS channel.